Hey, everybody, this is Kenny. Welcome back to another edition of the Leading from the Middle podcast. This is the podcast for middle managers who want to develop themselves, develop their teams, and improve their results. Part of improving your results is improving your culture. What exactly is culture? How do you measure that? How do you define that? How do you change that? How do you just create a culture that people can't wait to get to work? Well, folks, I spoke to the author of Jumpstart Your Workplace Culture, a roadmap for igniting high performance. Eric Stone joined me, and wait till you hear the advice that Eric gave today. It is some really great practical things for you to do, not only to develop and create that culture, but to measure it and maintain it. You don't want to miss a second. Let's get at it.
This episode is brought to you by Kitcaster. Kitcaster books you on top podcasts. How do funded startup founders attract prospects and talent? Podcast interviews. How do entrepreneurs with exits find new deals? Podcast interviews. How do C-suite execs differentiate in crowded markets? Podcast interviews. Kitcaster books you on top podcasts. Click the link in the show notes for a special offer. Celebrate good conversation.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of the Leading from the Middle podcast. I have got a tremendous leader today that is going to talk about one of those things that we sometimes overlook, that we need to start with first, and that is workplace culture. So I got the honor here to talk to the author of Jumpstart Your Workplace Culture, a roadmap for igniting high performance. Eric Stone has joined me today. Eric, it is so great to have you on. How you doing, sir?
Kenny, great to be here. So happy to join and share some stories with your amazing audience.
Yeah, awesome, man. I thank you so much, and thank you for the time. And this is such an important topic. I really want to start with, because I'm amazed that something drew you to really zero in on culture, workplace culture in particular. So tell us a little bit about your backstory and what were some lessons along the way, but what really drew you to help so many people now when it comes to workplace culture?
You got it. So my background, grew up great parents. Father was a textile salesman. I used to eavesdrop as he would come home from a late night business trip, and he'd be sharing all his stories of his clients and the ups and downs of his interactions. And I loved it.
Yeah.
And then my mother was a teacher. And so I kind of learned a little bit about the coaching and development that you need to have in order to kind of have this engagement in your classroom. And that kind of drew me into this fascination with business. More specifically, what makes certain organizations, sports teams, businesses perform at the highest of levels for an extended period of time. And then I always loved to watch business movies, the movie Wall Street and the rise and fall of Gordon Gekko.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
Movies about sports, the Hoosiers and Remember the Titans with Coach Boone, who finds a way to bring people together. And so I kept getting experience with stuff that got me more and more engaged. So I decided to major in business for schooling, for college. Came out, my dream job was to be the GM of the Boston Red Sox, but unfortunately they were not hiring college graduates. So I couldn't do that. And I got really lucky. I fell into an amazing company where I started entry level, a company called Enterprise Holdings, which is Enterprise National in Alamo, and spent over 25 plus years starting as a individual, one of four in an office, just learning the ins and outs. And was able to fortunately rise up the ranks and become an officer after 10 years, and was able to lead a few different regions within the company. And I again, just fell in love with the ability to unlock someone's potential. Mm-hmm. And so I then took that experience and said, you know what, I think I have something to give. I think I have even more to give. After rising through the ranks within Enterprise. And I wanted a message. And instead of maybe impacting a couple hundred people, maybe I could impact a couple thousand, 10,000 people. And that gave the genesis of writing a book that I was passionate about through my experiences in life about high performance. And so I took that book, which is just about to get available for pre-order. It's out October 3rd. And I actually do some speaking in that to share the message, to share what this unique thing that organizations can do to create this unbelievable engagement that leads to unique outcomes. What are they doing? And I also will consult individuals as well as organizations along that way. And you also asked about lessons learned, and I have had plenty of them along the road. Some in the beginning were what not to do. So I might have witnessed maybe one of my leaders, how much they would show stress to their team and how they would respond to a situation. And I actually learned how to digest and not be too emotional with things. And so I took anything I could that would be on the opportunity side. But then there were some who just showed me how to be a business leader, showed me why we make decisions. Why is it important to create a relationship and increase your sales? What does it do to the financial statements? Why is it important to grow your business and treat your customers and employees right? And so you take a whole bunch of that. I had one opportunity. I was sure I was going to get the promotion. And of course, as I would find out, I didn't. But that lesson was the two senior leaders within the organization personally came down and spent time with me on what I needed to do in order to ensure I got the next one. And so there are so many small lessons.
Wow.
Those stories bring in resiliency and empathy and how to respond properly and how to coach and develop. And so those are just a few things.
Yeah. Wow. That is, it's an amazing journey that you've had. And it sounds like you worked within a really good culture. I think that's great. But you also had those moments. I love it. So let's dive in, Eric. How do you define workplace culture? What's a basic definition for workplace culture?
Yeah, for me, the simplest version to keep it real easy is when your behaviors align with your values. There are no gaps.
Yeah.
And when that happens, it's amazing what is embraced. And I think if I had to give the simplest definition, it would be that.
Yeah, I think that's a great definition. And so I'll just go right here because I hate to admit this, I don't hear a lot of leaders talk about this first. Is this the most important thing, do you think, when it comes to really building your team to kind of start here? And why don't more leaders talk about it first?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I think it's misunderstood. I mean, I think when people think of culture, they're thinking of this soft, philosophical hugs, high fives, rousing speeches, and things like that. And
Uh,
there are pieces of that, of course, right? That's really, really important. But what I found is culture was truly the catalyst to the execution of the strategy. And when you build something special, when your behaviors are aligned with your values, it gets embraced, it gets contagious. It is as it's built, becomes the shock absorber for your organization. So when things get tough, when you treat people right, it gets them through those tough times. And so culture was it was almost the engine, but it was the shock absorber. I did a recent piece on LinkedIn that it corporate culture's relationship to a car. And there are so many funny similarities,
hmm.
but I think it's misunderstood. And I think personally, I thought it was the main engine.
Yeah. I do too. And so you named a lot of myths, I think, about culture. Does it start, Eric, with defining and agreeing on the values first? Is that where we start?
So, yeah, I mean, I think every organization has them, and every organization lists them. And I truly believe every organization wants to live them. The problem is it becomes the true poster on the wall.
Uh,
And what honesty and integrity mean to Kenny and me might be different. And so you need to share what are the behaviors that back your values. And I think that's the easiest place to start.
hmm. Yeah, I love that. And that makes so much sense to me. So if I'm a new leader and I've just taken over, a retail store and the culture has been toxic, let's just say, I need to have some conversations now. Do these start, Eric, one-on-one, or do you recommend, talking to the whole team first? Where do we actually start?
Yeah, I think part of the outreach, and depending on how many folks you're overseeing, but I absolutely think it is part of it. I talk a lot about these factors of engagement and how do you get people excited. And so if I'm a new manager, one of the first things I'm doing is I'm going to make sure I'm developing a relationship with my team. And that is not just you, it's everyone within the organization. And what are
Yeah.
those things so you can understand what motivates people, what makes them tick personally, what are some of their hobbies and interests. You really got to understand, how do they like to be managed, what are the things that motivate them. And so to me, it always started, you got to come in and do those one-on-ones to create a strong relationship with your team. Within that, next is probably making sure that everyone has a clear understanding of the expectations and goals that everyone has for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing sometimes the disconnect, or how many people aren't even aware of what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yes. Yes.
I think then as you progress, it goes into making sure that they have the right materials, equipment, and information to achieve the desired outcome. Do they have the right training along the employee journey from onboarding all the way through? And so they really have to kind of be digging in on that. They have to really, going to the first point, but making sure that they encourage personal and professional development. So their last half of their meeting might be all about a speaker coming in and talking about financial literacy or time management, things that are going to remove anxiety and stress from my life that make it feel real. I can not only apply it at work, I can apply it at home, and then really figuring out what's the system that you're going to recognize performance. So you will always recognize effort, reward performance. And so having these right rewards, how many awards, what are the diversified awards, so those are a few important things that as you're coming in through the one-on-one, some things that you could build within your team or organization.
That's vital. Oh my gosh. And I was going to tease you a little bit and say that if I sought to talk about the personal stuff, I might say, well, I want to be GM of the Boston Red Sox or something like that. Although he got fired today, by the way. But anyway, that's a whole other story.
So there's an opening, you're saying, Ken?
There's an opening, Eric. You got to jump on this.
I got a chance.
You have
All
to.
right.
Absolutely. I want to stay on that for a second, and I really want to dive into high performing cultures. Within those first, let's say 30, 60 days, and I don't like to put a time limit on it, but where should you start to look for some change, and then how do you measure it?
Yeah. Changing your culture, and again, it really does depend how many people you're leading. If it's hundreds, it can take a long time.
Yes.
If it's a team of 5, I mean, those things through that listen, observe, and learn phase can turn pretty quickly. When you have the ability to actually control your phones and answer the phones and bring in business, and you can have every interaction, you're kind of overseeing things. I mean, I think it happens pretty quick. It can on a team level. You do have to win them over, and you do have to, like I said, listen, observe, and learn. So if I'm a store manager, a restaurant manager, whoever it may be, I mean, it could be in a couple of weeks, you can slowly get some victories. If it's a big organization, it's going to take months. It could take 6 months. Really, it depends how deep and how out wide it is. But you'll always have an opportunity to build some slow victories. Now, from a measurement, it really, you could do the simplicities of an engagement survey, a pulse survey, to get slow tests. You got to have a baseline in the beginning of how things are, and then slowly measure it from there. So that's a kind of a quick thing to get started. And then there are some deeper things that usually tend to go into performance. Like I said, engagement. So an engaged workforce tends to lead into strong business outcomes from a service and sales and productivity. It reduces absenteeism. And so those things are stuff that you'll see over time. I mean, you can't change a customer service score in 3 days, but you can change a philosophy pretty quick with a small team.
Yes. Oh, that's awesome. And but it's got to stay on that awareness. How have you seen leaders that then get bogged down and get off course with culture, worried about numbers and results? Should we be thinking culture? I mean, we got to get both, right? But I would think the culture comes first, and then a lot of the results will come after. But I think that might throw some leaders off. Have you seen that? And if so, what's some advice that you give to those leaders out there?
Yeah, for me, it starts with culture. It
Yeah.
starts with,
Okay.
the unique thing about culture is it's very much like personal brand. And in personal branding, really that definition, it's what people say about you when you're not in the room. And then culture are the behaviors that happen when you're not in the room.
Yes.
And so, it is I always started there. You have to be human centric. It does not mean you really what allows you to do is build empathy and understanding with a shared accountability.
Wow.
And so
Yeah.
when you can do that, and it's a secret formula, it's kind of like the work-life balance, really difficult to find that formula. But when you can balance empathy with accountability, that was my approach to it. And so always for me personally started with culture on a human centric side with a high standard, living those factors that I gave you before, similar to how I would live my values. And when I did those things, it transitioned to numbers. You've probably heard the term trust the process.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
if you do the right things, I truly always believe the numbers will follow. And
Yeah.
so it was a little bit of a longer term thinking, but
Yeah. No, I love that. That makes so much sense. Philadelphia 76ers, right? Trust the process, I think.
that's right.
Um, it- so let's jump into it. This is great. I mean, you've just nailed so many things that I know are going to have leaders pausing here, because I think it needs to be back at front of mind and top of mind awareness for a lot of leaders that I see. What are some things that you've seen, Eric, that really are tip-offs that this is a high-performing culture?
Well, I mean, I think anytime you're assessing from an engagement side of things that you're getting great scores. I mean, numbers do kind of allow you to get a good understanding of where we go. You ever go to a restaurant and it just feels right? I
Yeah.
mean, you have the employees, they're high-fiving each other. They have their mood is great. The artifacts, kind of those behaviors that go behind the scene, the high five, the championship sales belt they're putting up, whatever it may be, you do kind of feel it. And conversely, you can tell instantly about a poor culture, but there's the simplicities of that mood and what you're seeing. High functioning cultures tend to have that listen, observe, and learn. I call it um, an hourglass approach. They look at the business that when they're high performing and when I say hourglass, not an eyeglass, which would be it's an hour. So it's us, it's all of us together. They find a way. It's just this place where people feel comfortable to come to you and say, hey, they provide the feedback, whether it's the customer, the client, the stakeholder, the board member, whoever it is. And that's the top of the hourglass. And as the sand will eventually come, as you gather that feedback and it goes through the sundial, or not the sundial, but the hourglass, you're dissecting all that information until clarity hits. High performing cultures have clear clarity, great communication. The sand that's going through it is the mission, it is the vision, it's our commitments, it's what we're all focusing on. And then they have this way, as the hourglass opens up again, to reinforce it through training and development. They put the information in reviews. You're always talking about it. And when you see organizations in alignment, that tends to be the answer. And as the sand hits the bottom, you kind of go back, turn it over, because something's going to happen again. A technology issue is going to happen. A crisis could happen.
Yeah.
And they use that kind of mentality, as well as measuring through certain surveys and things like that.
Yeah. Wow. That hourglass, and I love that you said hour instead of I. That's so great. But that is such a great word picture to think about. Um, uh, how does this impact, Eric, hiring? Because if I'm in a high performance culture and I've built this team, but now I have an opening, do you find that it sometimes takes a little longer for someone to fit in, or is the leader now looking for a specific way that they fit right in with the culture? Because I imagine that one person could start to bring that culture down a little bit. Well, how does this impact hiring? What have you seen on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, huge. I mean, really, it's amazing what happens when you hire the right individual. I would probably say it always starts there,
Yeah.
because if you hire the right candidate, they tend to figure it out. God forbid they don't get the coaching and training and development. So it definitely starts there. I don't think just because you're performing, it makes anything easier or harder. I think I kind of break it down to being careful that you don't look for just, I use an analogy I recently posted. Fit would be, I'm looking for a size 8 to be perfectly, that's what I want. They're going to fit into my culture. And it's a little semantics, but it's like, I got a size 8, I'm looking for a size 8, but that limits me from someone who is adaptable. And so I always tried to use the term match. And I would think of it, instead of the shoe size 8, it's the tie or blouse someone might wear that now makes the shirt, the jacket, my shoes pop out. And so
Wow.
I wanted someone who is going to bring more to it, not just fit into it. And so I think leaders who also have a high level focus of character, I used to say attitude, effort, and coachability, give me that, and I have a lot to work with. But when you have the right character and you have interview questions or things within the interview that truly tell you what they're truly about behaviorally, that is the match. It's
Wow.
like the head and the heart.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that analogy as well, with the shirt or blouse or shoe and right fit instead. Not going with just the right fit. I love that. It makes so much sense to me. Um, Eric, and staying on the same vein, what is the ABCs of communication? I know you talk about that. Define what that is, and where does that fit in?
Yeah, it's a nice, simple approach that I think everyone should embrace. The A is just, when you're communicating, you are amplifying. So there's the A is amplify the message. It is a new company policy. It is a fun new technology. It is a contest. You are going to do it via email, virtually, town hall, posting it. You're going to have it everywhere, and you're going to amplify that message.
Wow.
There are some times that you have to buffer the message, especially if you work for a large company at times. And so the buffer is when things are maybe a little misleading, confusing, is you take that 5-page essay and you put it into a nice paragraph. You buffer some of the message, keep it critical to what needs to know. And I always say, clarity beats speed. I want everyone to truly understand, and we know we can be swimming in emails and communication in today's world. And then the C is really needing to know when you convey the information. These are the ESPN did you knows you are going to kind of pass along to your team, a morning huddle, a quick recap meeting, or something like that. And so if you can use that, you now amplify the really, really important stuff. The buffer is what I call the distraction catcher. You eliminate and avoid the noise. You keep it, I guess, you keep the noise out, simply said, and then convey is just slowly moving on. And I think if you could try to focus on those things as you are disseminating, it'll be helpful.
Yeah, and that, so I love this because it's keeping culture right in the forefront all the time. And if you're doing those three things and you're coming back and repeating and repeat, I love that. That's fantastic. Um, I want to ask about hybrid and how does that play into culture. I shared with you before we got on that my last position with T-Mobile was 100% hybrid. And I tell anybody that asks me, it was difficult at times, because I had some high performing folks too, which sometimes made it even a little bit more difficult, for a lot of different reasons. But how does that play into culture if I have a hybrid team or even an all virtual team?
So I think there's a lot of challenges, and I think there's a lot of unknowns as it's been going on for quite a long time. The pandemic obviously accelerated everything.
Yeah.
I think the really good is your ability to attract people you might not have been able to attract. You can now hire someone in Mississippi and they don't have to be here. And so it does allow you to find that right match and find them quicker. So, that's just one small benefit of it. And it does pose challenges on the side of, well, how do we get people together? And so culture's timeless principles. I mean, it really goes to those 5 factors. You still have to develop relationships. It's just how intentional are you going to be able to do it via periodic, not in-person things. And so the best thing is probably a hybrid approach, at least if you're trying to figure it out. But it makes it a bit of a challenge. But those principles, all you still need to clearly communicate virtually. Me and you are doing it right now. We developed the relationship before. We had a couple interactions, so we were developing a relationship. We were clearly communicating, hey, who's your audience, and how, we want to make sure that they're the most important. And I'm hopefully helping with the right materials and equipment to be successful.
No doubt.
And we're learning a little bit about each other personally for my opening story and professionally. And I think you said the GM spot's open, so there's my reward maybe at the end. So, I mean, you can still do it. It's just people are going to have to understand either I'm going to have to change how I do business, or I'm going to have to draw a line and say I'm not willing to do that. And that's a company's and an ownership's.
Yeah.
They're allowed to do that. If they want to have people in, that's up to them. They will lose people, but that might be who they are, and that's okay. But I would just say there's a lot of timeless principles still there. It does make it, I mean, Kenny, would you go to a wedding online? No. I mean, you're not going to go to a wedding online. Why? Well, because I want to be there. I want to experience what it's like. Everyone loses that when, I happened to just do a talk recently, and I saw the leader of the team huddling. This was in the city, huddling their team and coaching and guiding and pointing things out, which they would have been a little bit more challenging had they all been at home. So it's unique. You're going to have to find out what's right for you and your customers. And I think that's the critical thing. I feel that the customer, you got to be careful. We put so much on the employee experience, and rightfully so. We cannot forget that regardless of how we do it, the customer's experience needs to be great. Yes. And as long as you don't compromise that, then you've got to do what you got to do.
Yeah. That's great advice. All right, I've only got a couple of other things for this. Has been amazing. And I jotted this down, and I kind of remember it, but I want to jog you a little bit. I jotted down 2 words: road trip. What's that all about?
So when I was making the decision to share my message, I needed a metaphor for the book.
Yes.
And I know I learn through examples, and those examples help me digest it. And so as I was understanding culture being a journey, which is a bit of a road trip, and a metaphor of a car, because I've had some experience with companies with cars,
yes.
I thought it would be catchy to help people learn lessons. And then when I was doing the book, there would be fun little, what's on the bumper sticker, a roadside attraction. And so it became everything about a road trip, which is what it's all about when you're building this unique culture, high performing.
I love it. Love it. No question. So tell us about the book, and tell us what's going to make this book so unique. I think it's really a bad question to ask after everybody listened to you for these last 25 minutes, because I think they'll see, oh yeah, this is going to be unique. But I'm going to ask it anyway. What's going to make this book so unique?
I think there's several things. The biggest is practicality.
Yes.
I think, kind of like I explained with the metaphor, I wanted things that would stick. I wanted someone to leave and have several takeaways. And there are so many amazing authors who wrote amazing books. Some of them in the space, just the words are too big. It's abstract. I can't digest it personally. It's too philosophical. And I was always an operator of sorts. And so I think the practical examples from not only me, but me interviewing some folks who are in the Fortune 500 type of CEO world or leading teams. And then I think a different perspective of how you could potentially measure this nebulous type of topic, where it's not just about a survey. There are some other indicators that are qualitative and quantitative that, when put together, will give you a baseline. And it's just a different, unique approach that I hope people enjoy.
Oh, I'm sure they will. And I'm going to add your name to that list of great authors you just talked about. And I'll add one more thing, because you're a little too modest to say this, but you've been there and done this, and the advice you're giving is coming from a lot of personal experience as well. And I think that also is going to help make this very, very unique. And so I I want to ask this last question, and that is, how can people contact you and get in touch with you and be able to work with you, or have you come down and speak to their teams?
You bet. So I think the easiest thing is LinkedIn. I have been active on LinkedIn. So Eric Stone, you just look me up. ClearPath Ventures _ on Instagram. You could catch me on Facebook. My website is clearpathventures.com. And the book website is ericdstone.com. And you can learn all you want about speaking opportunities, one-on-one coaching opportunities, organizational opportunities that I can assist with.
Awesome. 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 Eric, that is amazing. And folks, no truth to the rumor that Eric will be adding Boston Red Sox intern is, as he's on that trajectory now to start. I'm kidding. I tell you, man, you really broke it down in such a phenomenal way, Eric. Thank you so much. And folks, please, please, please go register for the book. I know it's going to be just outstanding. It'll be stuff that you can use, because this is something that's, for some reason, I couldn't figure it out. It's gotten pushed kind of to the side. We're so, hey, we got to get results, got to get results. But as Eric said, you're not going to get the results if you don't build this. There's no doubt about it. So Eric, thank you again for joining me today and for being so generous with your time.
Kenny, really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me on the show.
Well, it's my pleasure. Folks, we're going to leave it there. This has been Kenny and Eric with the Leading from the Middle podcast. We'll talk to you real soon.